Hi. So tonight I want to talk to you about the project I am starting. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, I wanted to make an aquarium, something like this. This is from a online pet supply place that's very popular in the U.S. called Chewy. I get some stuff from my dog from them, and so I wanted to be not just, you can put make water look like it's in a container in cinema by having, you can take a duplicate of the container. You can make something a little smaller and then put a material on it, and then you'll have, something of that, like in that sort of vein will get you something looking like a glass with fluid in it. I want to simulate this. And so far, I don't know if cinema is going to work very well for this. Now, I looked at some examples of, let me move this out, melting chocolate and faucets and things of that nature. And I wasn't getting the impact I want. Now, this is one example I was working on. So, if you can see here, I do get something water-like or something coming out of here. It's getting some weird artifacts and reflections, but the key thing is what you want in these. And see, one thing that's very important when you're doing this stuff is you must cache your sims before you try to display them. Now, this doesn't like turning. That's the other thing. It doesn't like to turn if you're in the middle of if you're not at the beginning. And this is being a little slow. Let's see. But anyway, I was able to get something out of here. So let's have a look. I'm going to show you, play it through. And this is cached, I believe. It takes a little bit. And you'll start seeing stuff. And what I did here is I used a trick that I learned in the School of Motion Ascend class, where I use forces, field force, to force this volume to go up and through the tube by having the force tied to the spline that if you look here, now this is turned off because I created a sweep here, and the spline where's the sweep I'm actually using? It's this one. Spline is the same spline that we used to create the sweep, that is based on, this sweep here. And so sweep 2 is based on this, and so I can reuse the spline and have the field force follow the spline. You can see it comes up and out. So let's turn this off because you can actually see something now. I'm going to stop it if it decides it wants to stop. It should, because I'm pretty sure this is cached. Let's see. Now, if you're using X particles, I believe it could be done fairly simply in X particles. Let me just show you this here. This is the pyro output. As you know, to get a pyro, this is using the pyro system. To get a pyro system, you take the object that's going to be your source, you give it a a pyro emitter, and I'll also create this pyro output. So this pyro output lets you cache, and it's very important to cache because otherwise Redshift gets really upset when you try to render it. So let's see what we got here to show you. Redshift render view. If we start it, because we should see it from a, and you can see you weren't getting it. What was not happening is it was not like filling. What you wanted to do is fill the tank up. So it was, for this, it was not working that great. And I tried some other things and not great effect. Like this didn't even show anything. Let me turn, so I don't have too many things up. Let's close this, we don't need this. This is, where's the one that we were just looking at? Yeah, let's turn this off now. I don't want to save anything. Let's see, we had an older one. I had a bunch of them because I've really been playing with this, and let's look at, I think this one might be interesting. Do I have water in here? Yeah. So what happens when I did this is, well, let's stop it so I can put it at an angle you can see. You can see it is slowly building a mesh. And the problem is, as you'll see in a minute, it's gonna get out of control. And I tried using a destructor, which worked with the faucet example we saw, or the faucet-like example we saw. But for some reason, it's not recognizing the destructor, it's not recognizing the collider tag on the cube, or on, if I put it on this thing, it's so, needless to say, trying to get flowing water type of thing, and I did some Googling. So far I've not found a good example of actually being able to have a water sim in a container. I found water sims, as I said, a faucet, melting chocolate that worked, but they weren't like this. Now, for example, again, if I want to actually see it and see what I actually have, I need to go to this pyro object, and I need to cache the scene, and we can call it experiment big, the big volume. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through and it's going to just cache out that. And again, this is critical when you're working with these big volumes in Cinema, because Redshift is going to not give you what you want. You have to be careful with memory in any of these renderers. What I ran into, I can tell you what I ran into, not just with this, but I'm going through a school of motion lighting and kind of look dev type class, kind of third class of their classes. And the first task they had us do was create like a city scene, because that's kind of the whole theme, that is, you're going to have like a, you know, a city scene, you know, futuristic type with, you know, dark kind of thing. And I started running into problems with getting it to render. So the key there was you needed to, all these buildings, I made instances of them. So basically, if you have an object in Cinema and you need to make a duplicate, as long you can make an essentially a copy that's not a full copy. It's essentially a copy that points back to the original item to get the information it needs to render it, to display it. And they have instances and render instances. And in order to get this thing to work, I needed to turn them not just to instances, but to render instances, and because otherwise I'd run out of memory. So you have to be careful with that sort of thing, because these buildings were, I mean, the buildings they provided for us for this exercise were very highly detailed, beautifully done, but that means they take memory, and you may find this if you get stuff from Kit Bash or any of these places where you have some fairly sophisticated buildings or other objects that take up a lot of memory. So this has been problematic, but it is, where does one go when one wants to do a simulation that they can't do it in Cinema? The next logical thing is Houdini. So in the next week, my next thing is I'm going to start researching flip fluids, or go back to them. Fortunately, I have some good references on it. I have Mark Fancher's class that I bought a couple of years ago from mograph.com. Very good class for teaching C4D artists how to move up to Cinema. Cinema C4D artists how to move up to Houdini, or use Houdini as they need it. So that is something I'm going to be looking at, and that'll allow me to get the simulation the way, hopefully get an actual, the idea, if you look at a fish tank, I'm just talking while this is, oh, it looks like it just changed. We'll look at this in a minute. I want to show you. Yeah, so now I have it rendered, and you can see I can get through it kind of quickly, but you're going to see where is the problem. Now remember, I have a soft body tag on here. I have a collider body tag on here. I have a destructor, which may not be the right size. That's something I can play with, but not doing what I needed to do. And consequently, I end up with this blob rather than what I'm looking for. So if you render it, you can see you got this kind of a blob rather than flowing water. Now there may be some other things I can do, but this is to me, this is not what I want. If I want flowing water, again, if you have X Particles, I'm pretty sure X Particles has water simulations built into it. I think this is the one thing Cinema is missing right now. You kind of have to kludge them up using the pyro. And there are two ways I saw it done. The one I'm using here is using density and turning off temperature. I've seen it done the other way too. And in fact, that other example may have been doing it that way, where you use temperature and you turn off density, and there is something else that you have to mess with, and I believe it's in the pyro somewhere, where there is a, let's see, density threshold, that you have to play with that in order to get it to actually display anything. if you're using density, I still think it's the density threshold in order to get things to display if you're using temperature. But I'm not happy with this, so I'm going to be looking into Houdini as a solution. I don't have X particles. I figure if I have Houdini, I don't want to spend $800 however many. It's fairly expensive. But let's look at what ultimately I want here. Now the aquarium itself is very easy to make. All I did, and let's get rid of this mess here. So I took a cube and I divided it up. I mean, gave it the right size, gave it the the subdivisions, and then I did a loop selection on the top and the bottom, slightly extruded them, and then I used I have polygon selection, and let's see if this is going to show me. So show you the polygons. I think in this one I had two. So have my polygon selections, and let's say and put the different materials, and then put a glass material at the base, and then these, I think I use camera grip to get kind of black. If you look at the example here, where is it? You can see you got kind of a black on the top and bottom, the cover and the covers and everything, and then the filter. Notice, so what I want is if you look at a fish tank with a filter, it takes the water in. It's like any filter. It takes in the water needs to be filtered and then spits out filtered water. And sometimes you have below gravel filters. It'll also, take in the water to be filtered and spit out filtered water. So I want that, see if I can get that going. So then kind of have a fluid simulation that's moving because I have a filtering effect. And then I get sculpt some fish, which should be fairly easy because fish are not a complicated structure. And they're pretty easy to animate. You basically have one, cord, and you're going to probably put one set of bones, and then you're going to also want to control the fins, and the tail would be moving as part of the main cord. So we're going to get into all that. I think this will be fun, and I think the next is tackle the hardest thing first. I want to try to tackle the fluids, and if I can get that going, that provides a lot of value to you, and then everything else should kind of fall into place, or at least be easier. But you may find using Houdini, flip fluids are been in Houdini for some time, and there's plenty of references about that. So I think that is going to be the way to go, which may mean I may decide to do the whole simulation part with the fishes and the filter and the water and all that. Do that in Houdini, because as we've seen in a previous video, if you texture it in Houdini, you texture something in Houdini Redshift, you can spit out a bunch of RS files and just bring it right into Cinema, and then, do whatever else you want, your final lighting and so on. Find your final lighting, your any other things you want. Now you have to be careful of scale, and this is one other thing that I want to say about that. There is something in cinema called the figure. Okay, this is how you can judge whether something is, get the scale. So this is like a, you know, normal size human man. I forget the exact height, if they're 6 foot or 5'11" or what have you. But you could see if something's totally out of scale. This is a pretty big aquarium, but because it's probably, if you look at the arm, it's probably, yeah, this is a big aquarium, but you get the idea. So this is invaluable for when you're coming up with a scene, and also it will help you because here Houdini, and I always forget this. Their things are either scaled 100 times smaller, I think, than cinema, or 100 times larger. When you bring something from cinema to Houdini, there is a difference in scale, and I think it's about 100. One of them is 100 times bigger than the other. So you have to be careful about that as well. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful. I hope you're excited to kind of follow along as I work on this. And like I said, making the making the aquarium itself easy. The Getting the fluid, the water working the way I want. Then making a few fishes and animating them and getting them to, so I can have them kind of animate them through the fish tank. We want the bubbly water, and then probably model different uh, things that would make it decorative. I mean, most people put like decorative gravel. They put little plants or plastic plants or what have you. And of course, a freshwater aquarium is quite a bit easier than a saltwater aquarium. Anyway, so we will be getting this going. I think the next step will be getting those fluids to go, and I think it's time to get into Houdini. And I will speak to you next time. Take care.